Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you are tuning in from. My name is Adrian Reed, and a very warm welcome to this BA Community webinar. Now, I quite regularly introduce these sessions by saying good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because I know we have a global audience, and never more so than today. If you're a regular participant in these webinars, you'll know these are usually evening UK time, but this is morning UK time because we're very, very lucky to have with us Kathy Berkidge, who's connecting all the way over from a different country and continent over in Australia. What time and day is it there, Kathy?
It's 7:30 at night. So we are on Tuesday the 16th at 7:30.
Okay, so you are the same day, because that's when it gets confusing when we span multiple days. Now, one topic that if you're viewing you may be interested in, in fact I'm sure you're interested in, is stakeholder engagement, really getting to know people, really building rapport. And we're going to be talking today about how mindfulness might fit into that tricky, twisted and sort of messy subject. So before we get going, a little bit about Kathy. So Kathy has a really quite varied and interesting career, from developer to BA to agile BA, through to agile trainer, coach, speaker, author, all of those sorts of good things now. And I think it's fair to say that Kathy, one thing that you're really enthusiastic about alongside all of those things is mindfulness and how that applies in a business analysis change setting. So Kathy, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's absolutely my pleasure, Adrian. Great to see you again, and great to have everyone here too.
Yeah, definitely. So before we get started, a few things to mention. One is, if you are attending live, you can ask questions using the Q&A panel, and we'll cover as many of those questions as we can throughout the session. If you've been to one of these sessions before, you may remember that we also have a shared note-taking tool. So in just a moment, it's not in the chat yet, but I will add a link to the mural board. Now, first of all, you'll notice on the right-hand side there are a few links. So, as and when you want to connect with Kathy and me, you can do that. There's also some other links that you might find interesting. But more importantly, over on here, you've got the ability to add notes. So when Kathy says something that particularly resonates with you, you can add your note, and then we'll have, dozens or 100 or however many people adding notes at the same time. The idea being that we've got a useful shared resource at the very end that we can refer back to. So I'm just going to put that link in the chat now. So you'll see that link in the chat now, and we'll bring that up about halfway through, which is always terrifying because I can't see it because it's on my other screen, and we'll see what people have added. Normally really, really useful stuff. So add as many sticky notes as you can. So Kathy, one question I suspect many people tuning in will have is, what is mindfulness, and why is it particularly relevant for engaging with stakeholders? Two pretty big questions to kick off with now I think about it.
We may as well start in the deep end, I think. So it's not really that hard. Mindfulness has a lot of different aspects. And if you look at 5 different blogs or articles, you'll find 5 different definitions. For me, I keep it simple, apparently. It's all about awareness. Now, that's all really great. Oh, awareness, what we're always aware. But actually, half the time, and nearly half the time, psychological studies show we are not actually aware of what's going on around us. The classic example, when you're driving somewhere and you're driving and you don't have you're so busy with your thoughts, you don't really know what's really happening, and you arrive at home or at work or wherever you're going, and you get out of the car and you think, I don't remember how I got here. I mean, I know I drove. That's because we weren't really aware. We were so lost in our thought. So mindfulness is the complete opposite of being off in thought and not really paying attention. It's all about awareness. Now, awareness is in 2 forms. The inner awareness, what's going on up here between the ears, what's going on in our thoughts and our emotions and our feelings, and also what's going on with bodily sensations even. Am I hot, cold, tingly, sweaty, whatever it might be. So awareness, both inner And then, of course, awareness of outer, which means what's really in front of me? What am I really seeing? Because we might see a blue sky and a sunset and some clouds, but we don't see a blue sky and a sunset and clouds. We put labels on it. Oh, it's beautiful. Oh, it's romantic. Oh, it's so artistic. So suddenly we're making judgments and kind of liking or not liking everything around us. So when we talk about awareness outside, we're really talking about without those judgments, without those preconceptions, without all those labels that we'd like to do with everything. I like it, I don't like it. So we kind of look at things as they are, with dropping those thoughts, those kind of labels, as I said. So it's all about trying to be present in the moment, because when we're daydreaming and our thoughts are drifting, quite often I call it time traveling. We're either thinking about the future and making plans and maybe anticipating things, or we're time traveling backwards to the past and rehashing events and really ruminating about things. So awareness of the present is really, I'm right here. I can be aware of my senses and my thoughts, and I can see what's in front of me as they actually are. So this awareness allows us to detect better what's happening with our thoughts. And most importantly, when we're talking with stakeholders, if we're really paying attention and really being present and aware, we're more likely to not just be aware of what's happening with us, but what's happening with them. So it's a special way of paying attention to our stakeholders so they really feel aware of what might be happening with them. By being aware like that, we might be able to detect, are they tired? Are they frustrated? Are they distracted? Are they unhappy? If we're more aware, we can detect these subtle cues and better tune into them. For me, stakeholder engagement, the number one tool is these things on the side of our head, listening and remaining present. While we think we listen, so often our mind is not really listening properly. We're thinking of what to say next, or we're thinking about the solution, or we might be listening to that inner chatter. You know, that chatter that's constantly saying, I don't know, what am I having for lunch? Oh, I have to pick up the kids after school. You know, that inner chatter. That distracts us. That means we're not really paying attention. We're not really present. And our stakeholders can detect. You all probably have been in the experience when you know someone's not paying attention to you because they are thinking. So one thing stakeholders really feel when you're present is they think, oh, I've really been heard. This person understands me. They care about what I'm telling them, because our stakeholders are quite often telling us their inner thoughts and problems and what they're thinking. And if we don't make it a safe, easy place for them to share, where they think, oh, I'm going to be ignored, what difference does it make? If we make it clear that we really are going to be there, then they're more likely to engage with us.
Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying there, Kathy, about that whole idea of going on autopilot, because one thing I've certainly found as a BA, and perhaps if you're listening in, perhaps you've felt this too, is, you know what it's like, you do multiple interviews with stakeholders, and by about the third, you sort of think, right, I sort of know the situation now. So you ask the questions, but you end up writing down what you expect. I find I have to consciously fight the urge to write down what I expect to hear. and I've learnt myself now, like, it's kind of like that, that whole idea of the sort of black swan, where seeing another white swan doesn't actually give you any more information. You already know there are white swans. Sometimes I'm almost like, well, I'm listening out for that thing that I'm not expecting, or that slight nuance where I say something and the person sort of just slightly grimaces, and it's like, oh, hang on a minute, there's something there. So do you think that's part of it too, is that mindfulness enables us to hear those black swans, hear the things that, like those tacit things that would be overlooked really easily if we were just thinking about how to respond, or we were thinking about, thinking about the traffic or whatever?
It's so true. We as BAs, it's so common to hear people jumping to their own conclusions, saying, I already have heard this before. I know it, so I don't really need to listen anymore, or only if I hear something novel. We're very quick to make those judgments and go into solution mode. So mindfulness, because we're being what I call meta-aware, meta-cognizant of what's happening, I can say, am I really being present here, or am I jumping to those conclusions? Am I making those judgments? Am I tuning off because I've heard all this before? So mindfulness allows us to kind of detect when our minds are in that mode of, I'm not really listening anymore because I think I know this. And we can kind of drop them and say, hang on, let's remain present. Let's remain curious. Let's pretend I've never heard this and I've never heard this problem or this situation or this remark before, and see it a little bit like a little kid does. You know, when they think of the kid, a small child, they go to the ocean. The first time they've ever seen the beach, they're like, whoa. But when you've been to the beach 100 times, it's like, beach. For those who know me, you know that outside this door is the beach. So for me, I still go down there, and every single time I still blow myself away with, oh my word, it is the beach. So we're really staying present by dropping all those memories and habits and bias and beliefs, and dropping them by being aware that we've actually started thinking them. And by being aware, that allows us to drop them and remain present, and to really, truly hear what's being said, not just what we think needs to be said.
That's really interesting. As you were talking there, I was thinking about someone I used to know. In fact, a couple of people I used to know used to be tour reps. So the kind of people that work in resorts and help tourists. And one of the things I remember one of them saying to me is, you'll get asked the same question hundreds of times, because you've got a new group of people coming in every week, and like it'll be, where's the pool, you know? But the thing is, you've been asked that 100 times, but it's the first time they've asked you. And she said to me that the thing is, then but they're asking for different reasons. You know, it might be that they're trying to find the kid-friendly pool, and I've just made that sort of connection that it's that mindfulness about what the person is really asking, what they're really saying, which can be a different thing from the words that they're expressing. So what would you say? Because I suppose one tricky area that we all deal with as change professionals and just as people in life really is sort of like difficult, in inverted commas, stakeholders. So conflict or disagreement. To what extent can mindfulness help with that?
Oh, those difficult, challenging stakeholders. And it doesn't even have to be them with us. It could be them together. We might be in a workshop where they're challenging because the two of them are arguing, which is where I've come a lot of experience. But for me, because again, when we think of mindfulness and if we use the word awareness, we can become really hyper aware of what's happening with us. Are they triggering emotions and feelings? And if we don't pay attention and we're not aware of our inner feelings and what's happening in ourselves, we probably have little control over them. So we might find ourselves without mindfulness getting frustrated. And even if we manage to keep our mouth shut and have that smile on our face and it looks on the surface as if we're just fine, those subtle body language cues will make it clear that actually we are frustrated, or we are getting angry, or we are impatient. So mindfulness is not about masking that. It's about, hey, I'm being impatient, stop it, to myself inside, and remaining patient. So the body goes where the mind goes. So if the mind is calm, the mind is relaxed, the mind is present, the body will too. So those subtle cues that can tell our stakeholders that we're not really happy won't actually appear, because we're able to subside. Or again, I'm not talking about suppression. I'm just saying we can recognize the negative side and say, I don't want to think that. And we choose a more patient, more neutral, more understanding, and perhaps even empathetic or even compassionate stance instead of that angry or frustrated stance. And that will come through. We haven't suppressed it. We've just chosen to think in a more light-hearted, more open-hearted way. Now, that might sound all like, oh, what is this, kumbaya stuff? But this is the key for happiness and the key to dealing with difficult situations that we go through. for example, I was in a workshop, two stakeholders were absolutely adamant about their stance on this new invoice approvals process. One thought it was this, one thought it was that. Now, I was clearly, we can kind of go, I wish that, you know, the inner voice goes, why can't Ken just see that it's the same thing, but just this different, they can't get to it. And my inner voice, that inner chatter, can actually bring on and what's the word, emphasize our frustration. But instead, if we choose not to listen to that inner voice and say, well, obviously they just need to talk it through, and we take a stance of facilitating helpful conversations rather than, can't you just get to the point, or all those thoughts. So mindfulness can really help with stakeholder engagement when they're in dispute, or in fact, we don't like what they're saying or they don't like what we're saying. We can really look at what's happening in our minds, watch our expressions, watch what our thoughts are trying to tell us, watch what that inner voice is trying to tell us, and remain calm, remain considered, remain kind, and facilitate dialogue in a helpful way, and remain a really, what I call that kind view of the other person. They're the same as me. They're worthy, they're smart, they're talented, they're intelligent, they're probably under stress, and they've got all sorts of things happening for them too. So we can remain a view that, oh, we don't think they're, you know, all the things that our inner voice might be saying, oh, I can't believe this guy, blah, blah, blah. We can kind of quell those inner chatter and stay closer. And there's a wonderful thing I read recently about mindfulness. Mindfulness is what we call a carefulness of our thoughts, of ourselves, and of others. So when we are in these difficult conflict situations, we can have that carefulness of thought to make sure that we don't add fuel to any sort of fire that might be maybe smouldering somewhere.
That's really interesting, Kathy, and I love that idea of mindfulness being almost a carefulness, a deliberate, a considered way of thinking, deciding, sensing, and responding in a way, isn't it? And we've had a question come in, and do remember, if you're live, we'll take as many questions as we can as we go through. And I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Forgive me if I'm not. I think it's Maruna. Maruna says, these days, most of us are working from home. How can we sense the stakeholders in this context? Online meetings, maybe without webcams turned on. And of course, that can be a challenge, can't it? Because there are people who perhaps might not have the sufficient bandwidth. That, you know, it might not be they don't want to turn their cameras on. It might be that they can't turn their cameras on, or they're blocked. I mean, any tips on that, Kathy?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of reasons why we can't see faces. So when we're communicating, you know, everybody's heard the same old thing, you know, words are only 7%, blah, blah, blah. It is actually true. So that means as a BA, it takes extra effort for us to connect with them, despite the fact we can't physically see them, whether it's on the screen or in person. So we've got to perhaps have an even more open mind, an even more curious and inquisitive mind, to try to ask them, hey, how's your day going? Or what's really keeping you up at night when we think about this? Or what would be an ideal solution? So we need to actually go beyond what we might already know. And once again, us BAs, we're terrible for thinking we know things, and then we forget to ask the question. So we've got to pretend we come to it open, and we are able to ask those questions. We are able to perhaps build that little bit of rapport. And that rapport, we really mean a relationship where we actually say, I know this person. I know their kids' names or their pets' names, or where they are in the world, or whatever it might be. So we can build those relationships when we're not face-to-face, and also connect with them as best as we can, because face-to-face is always going to be best. There's ever going to be no replacement. But when we don't have that extra level of effort, I say almost when you're remote, you need to put 50% extra in, just to find out a little bit more about what's happening behind that black screen with just a name on it.
Yeah.
How they today? What has worried them lately? What did they find was fantastic about the last workshop? Whatever it might be, just to get that sense.
It's interesting because a tip that someone I was working with recently shared with me, which I've not really tried yet, but I really like the idea of, is they said if you can't have video, then maybe have a shared whiteboard like a mural board, and just get everyone to paste their photo and a short and like their hobby or something, like something not related to the topic you're discussing, so that they're kind of, because and I think what I liked about that was, it's like, then it's not just the voice at the end of the phone, you know, then there's the, because I suppose it's easier to be empathetic when it's a person, when there's more of that human connection. So a question that Tracy asks, and this is one I'm absolutely certain that many of us will recognize, is any tips for stakeholders who choose not to engage as they believe they have given you the solution? Oh, they really do that sometimes, don't they? So they don't, they don't need to engage further. It's like the JDI. You know, I've chosen X. Just do it. Don't do any analysis. Don't ask me any questions. Come back when it's delivered. I mean, I'm simplifying, but it's that kind of pattern.
I love a solution given as a requirement. That's my favourite. And funny enough, I was working with BAs today in an ECVA course with exactly the same thing. So we can't say, no, tell me the requirement under solution. We'll go, okay then, so what do you think the benefit would be? Or if that wasn't delivered, what? So I think that, once again, keeping that open mind and not feeling like, oh, well, I can't believe John just told me that, and, you know, because our minds, they go into that mode when we think they've disengaged and they haven't been behaving the way that we wanted them to, right? So our mind starts going, all right, well, they've offended me, or I think that they're blah, blah, blah. So we need to be able to drop that and say, actually, let's be curious here. I wonder why he asked that. I wonder why he didn't want something else. I wonder what's below that. So, okay, they might not want to answer our questions, but we've got to do our best as a BA. We can't bring blood from the stone. I mean, you know, there's only so much we can do. I always say us BAs are superheroes, that there's only so much superpowers we have. If someone switches off the phone and hangs up on us, well, we can try to do our best to reconnect, but I think it's really about, that's fantastic, you know, remain interested, genuinely interested, and then try to dig below that surface and try to figure out where that solution or that statement has come from, and see if there is something further that can say, well, if we couldn't do that, what would be another alternative? Or in a perfect world, is that the only way we could do it? You know, trying to find those questions by keeping our mind open to possibilities, rather than, oh, well, I've been told, all right, I'm a waitress now, I'm taking his order, I'll send it to the kitchen. We're not doing that. That's not us as BAs. So trying to figure it out a little bit deeper means that we've got to connect with our own thought patterns to allow us to take that breath and try again. And again, when we have those stakeholders, building rapport again is very important. Building that relationship, that tuning into them. Maybe they are stressed. Maybe they haven't slept well. Maybe they've got meetings back to back to back and they haven't got time. So I can't alter that for them. All I can do is alter my behaviour to best fit in with them. So by altering my approach to better suit their approach, we're more likely to get that engagement and get that communication flowing. So mindfulness allows us to tune into that person and find a way.
Tuning in. And, so I'll combine a couple of questions here. We'll take a couple of questions and then we'll move on to some other topics. But do keep your questions coming in, and we'll cover as many of them as we can. So I'll combine these two questions. So Tina asks, if you realise you are not present and you've got too much on your mind, should we admit it and reschedule or persevere? Which I think is a fantastic question. So I'll be very interested in your answer to that one. And sort of related, but from a different angle, Mirana asks, how about multitasking? For example, most of my colleagues are, might say read and respond to emails during online meetings. You know, how do you have that conversation about saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, but, you know, how can we have the conversation that that's perhaps not a good idea with someone who is multitasking. And of course, the reality is from the research I've read, multitasking is a bit of a myth. It's really just switching. There are very few things you can really, certainly wouldn't want a surgeon reading their emails while they're doing surgery, would you? But then I know I say that flippantly, but then do you really want a BA reading their emails in a session where they're specifying the electronic patient record system that the surgeon is relying on to be correct? So we might think that it's not important, but it sometimes really can be. So any views on those two, Kathy?
Well, going to Tina's question first, if we realise that we're not present, well, depending on our level of mindfulness, and I don't know whether that's the right word to even say. Now I've even heard myself say it out loud. Mindfulness, you don't go through sort of levels and certifications of mindfulness practice. There's no such really thing. But if we can come and be aware and say, oh, my mind's drifted, well, as soon as we've come to that realization that we're not present, we can then have a choice. We have a choice all the time to choose what our attention is on. So if I choose to pay attention to these thoughts, if they're too powerful and, if my cat just died and I'm really just mourning it and I can't really remain present because I am too upset, well, yes, be kind to yourself and recognise that this is not the time to talk about those intensive care records. Maybe I do need to reschedule and maybe give some time out for myself. Now, whilst that's not the most professional answer, but it is what it is. Sometimes our minds can't be brought back because something is so severe happening that our minds simply are just needing to process. But if that's not the case and we're just daydreaming or thinking about the next presentation or thinking about the previous workshop where John and Dina had a big fight, whatever it might be, if we recognise that thought's come up and it's taking us away from what we should be paying attention to, we can then choose, put that thought aside and replace it with our focus or continue that thought. So again, I think the answer is if the more you become aware, the better choices you can make about where you direct your attention. So being present is completely in your control. There isn't some extra mind in your head saying, no, don't pay attention to that, pay attention to this. It's completely within your frontal lobes in your cerebral cortex to decide where you pay your attention to. And provided you're not being attacked by a raging bull or anything, you should be fine. You should be able to pay attention and bring yourself back to that awareness and remaining present.
Yeah.
So when we think of multitasking, it's very interrelated because we can't be thinking about yesterday's workshop and being present. We can't do the two things. Our minds do what we call fast task switching. So multitasking is only that, fast task switching. So I look at this, there's a classic video, and for those who know Ellen DeGeneres, the American TV girl, she's, well, slip of the tongue there. There's a classic skit she does where there's a mother holding a baby with a vacuum cleaner stirring the pot. You're thinking, well, she's multitasking. Well, she's physically doing three things, but which one is her mind paying attention to? Because as much as her body might be doing three different actions, almost like on autopilot, only one of those actions her actual attention will actually focus on. The others are kind of like background tasks. So we can't force anyone else to be mindful, nor can we force somebody else to single task, because you know that single tasking now is the new multitasking. You get more done. Everybody knows this. It's been known for decades. I don't know why it's suddenly groundbreaking out there. But if we can force ourselves and say, do you know the benefits are this? And perhaps if we do see that other person in the workshop taking their emails or texting or scrolling through Facebook, which believe me happens too often, we might be able to say, if you've got no other contribution, maybe you can leave. You know, I'm a bit naughty like that sometimes, but we can't force somebody else. All we can do is perhaps ask, is something, do we need to check in with them and bring them back to the attention, and perhaps have a word afterwards. I think just on that note, we need to impress upon our workplaces and our managers and those people around us to say, this is not acceptable behaviour, you know. So we need to say, you'll come to a meeting, leave your devices alone. I mean, apart from obviously when we're all online, but we need to sort of make it a social contract that we say when we come to a workshop or a meeting, it means we bring ourselves there and we ignore those distracting emails, etc. And if we're so time poor, we need to start thinking about, well, we need to prioritise and do things in order. So I don't know.
And it is a really tricky one, that, isn't it? Because I know, and this is something I suppose we've all struggled with, even even before online, you know, that it sort of was starting to become. It was the BlackBerry that did it, right? You know, where, and particularly when the BlackBerry was a status symbol. So it's like you had people of a certain grade that were like, well, I'm going to just type constantly because I want. It seemed there was a bit of a status symbol associated with it, and busyness and general. But I suppose another element to that is it places the emphasis on us to make particularly online things so engaging that people can't multitask or they don't want to, and I do think that sometimes using all the tools we have at our disposal and perhaps pushing, like, you know, I mean, I've been using a lot of online, like, shared whiteboards, as I know you have, Kathy, and at the beginning none of us had really used any of them because we were used to old whiteboards, but it's a way of people actually contributing and perhaps hopefully staying more engaged. And I suppose if someone really is multitasking, then there is the question, as you say, do they need to be on the invite list, or should we have a 15-minute one-on-one with them if that's the contribution that's needed? So,
or even just putting it out there and saying, look, I can see that something's going on there. Should we stop and pause? Should we reschedule? You know, maybe maybe there is something pressing that's going on. So by checking in as best as we can and doing it in such a way where, we're aware that we don't want to cause them to be embarrassed. We want to make sure we save their, save face type of thing, but be considerate too that, we're all just doing the best we can. We all have challenges and some days things are happening. So we need to, only we can control our own behaviour. We've got complete choice. No matter what we might not be able to choose our circumstances, but we can definitely choose our responses to them. That takes mindfulness to be able to check in, be aware, and respond from a position of awareness rather than going off like a knee-jerk reaction. Instead of kind of going, hang on, let's consider what's going on and come to it from that clear position.
Definitely. Let's take that terrifying moment now, where halfway through we'll look at the mural board. So if you've joined late, by the way, there's a shared mural board available for adding your thoughts to. So I'm just going to put it up on my screen now, and I will repost the link in the chat afterwards, just in case you weren't here at the very beginning. And there is absolutely loads of stuff. I think you created some really, really good conversations here. I'm looking at, so we've got you being present in the moment, listening without judging, choosing where to put your focus, looking out for subtle cues, remain calm and kind and calm. And someone found a really cool font, which I didn't know Mural had for that. So that we're all collectively learning as we go along. Choice with what attention to pay on, choose where to put your attention, facilitating useful conversations. So, and not adding labels, and more human connection. So it's fantastic. There's loads of really, really good stuff happening there. I will just in the chat paste the link to this mural, just in case you were tuning in late. So this is the short link to it, and you can go ahead and add your thoughts as we go through. And I will, at the end of the session, I will add a PDF on LinkedIn so people can take a look there. And do remember as well, on the side, if you're attending live, there's links on the side of the mural that you can click on for more information about stuff and connecting with people and that kind of malarkey. So, okay, so one question that I know I've had in the past, and I think probably many people do, is there's a sort of an assumption that mindfulness and meditation are identical, like mindfulness is meditation, And I suppose, like, you know, whilst meditation is excellent, we probably can't stop and meditate in the middle of a work. Or we could, but you know, there will be times when we can't stop and meditate. So I've come to learn that mindfulness is wider than that. But can you give some examples of how we could deploy mindfulness? Maybe, like, you know, you've got that situation where a stakeholder's really ranting and you can feel it boiling up. You know, how can we, what other ways are there of deploying mindfulness?
Absolutely. You can't really go into a full lotus position and chant Om and sit there and say, give me 20 minutes. Yeah. I'll be fine. Just come back then. Just scroll your phone for a little while. No. So absolutely, there's a relationship between meditation and mindfulness. So mindfulness is being aware in the present moment without judgment. You know, that's my little quick blurb about it. But to remain present and aware in the present moment takes practice. So meditation is a bit like the mind workout. That if we meditate, it enables us to become more aware in those formal meditation settings. And because we have kind of trained, you know, just like going to a gym, we've lifted some mind muscle with mind weights with our meditation practice, then when we're in our day-to-day job and dealing with stakeholders, we've put in the hard work at the gym, so to speak, so our strength is great for being mindful in the present moment without having to, you know, to go into a meditation pause. So mindfulness is available to you anytime, anywhere, free, of charge, 24/7, 360, all the rest of it. And it's as simple as stopping, taking pause, not following your thoughts, becoming aware of those thoughts, really saying, what's really happening here? Let's bring awareness in. What's going on in my inner voice? What's happening in my thoughts? What's happening in my perceptions? So we clear our mind. We really interrupt that thought pattern. Just for a moment, that one, even just the length of this. Yeah. That's all it takes. And from that more, hang on a minute, what's going on? We've brought in that light of awareness into what's happening, and then we can stop that kind of flow, which was kind of mindless or just happening. You can say, hang on a minute, internally, what am I really seeing here? What am I really thinking here? Is that the right thing? Am I judging? Am I going into solution mode? Am I thinking unkindly with my inner thoughts? And we all do it, and I know we all do it. So we can drop that inner voice and silence that mischievous inner voice that may be chattering away and really become aware of what's happening in our head. And also we can look to the other person. Yeah. What's going on with them? Why are they talking that way? Why are they angry or are frustrated? Why are they not with us? So we can try to bring some awareness in, and that pause is a really weird thing because the other person picks up that we've paused, and funny enough, they'll pause too. It just happens. It's a weird thing. Try it, you'll see. It's a bit like the yawning thing. Someone kind of, it's like that empathetic sort of thing. If you take pause and kind of go, hang on, what's going on here? It gives them a cue to pause as well. Yeah. So at any time we can do this practice, and it's stop, S-T-O-P, right? Stop. So stop means stop thinking, interrupt those thoughts, stop what you're doing. T is for take a few breaths, 1, 2, 3, 5, however many it takes, but do it with that awareness and that mindfulness. O is for observe. Observe what's going on in our attitude and our feelings and our body, our sensations, and the other person. And then P is for proceed now in a better, wiser, more beneficial pattern. Choose a wiser response. STOP, stop what you're doing, take a few breaths, observe what's going on, and proceed with more clarity.
With that deliberate clarity. And it's interesting because, again, as you were talking there, Kathy, I was thinking that one advantage of virtual meetings is pauses seem a bit more natural because you've always got a little bit of latency between you and the person. And one thing I've found, and you know, when at the beginning of the pandemic, this was sort of like, you know, because dead air is horrible. You know, when you ask, you've got a group of people you're facilitating and you're saying, has anyone got any comments? And there's nothing. I've learned that you basically, if you've got a group of people, some of them are on mute, right? Because we all, like, you know, you have to mute if you're in a. I've now learn. And although it feels like a long time to count to 7, and that feels like forever, so in silence. So has anyone got, what comments do you have? And these sort of 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and normally about 1, people will start to interject. But what I sort of found is that, as you're saying, that pause, it creates space. People don't feel rushed. They don't have to, if they don't get to the mute in time, they don't feel cut off. So I just want to bring in a question from Nefra here. And Nefra says, or asks, in meetings with active listening and in a meeting when some dominate and do all the talking, is there a best subtle way of getting a word in when a pressing question needs to be asked and the time allocated is coming to an end? I mean, I think that's a fantastic question from Nefra there.
And it happens so often too, Nefra. Great question. So while mindfulness can't fix that, we can fix our reaction. And instead of us internally, again, this is all this mindfulness side of where I'm coming from, is when that person is dominating, we might be sitting there and in our own mind thinking, I wish he'd just get to the point, because that's what's happening in our mind. You might try to deny it, but it's there. So we can drop that and say, I wonder why you says that. And so we can try to politely say, I'm sorry to butt in. We can try to be really polite, come to interrupt or what we need to as best we can without showing that frustration. Because if we can dampen and not listen to that inner voice that's pumping up our sense of frustration and anger and impatience, if we can say, I can see you impatient, I'm not going to be patient, so I'm going to come here and recognise that John doesn't really know that perhaps he might not be aware that he is being overbearing or whatever. We can come and see him kindly and say, I'm so sorry, John, I don't mean to interrupt, but we've got, we've only got 10 minutes. Maybe there might be something better we might need to discuss, or perhaps Joe has a question, or you might be able to see that somebody else really wants to interject. But you can come at it, once again, without that kind of reactive, frustrated way that we often do, because it's easy to do. We're frustrated that he's dominating, so we can go and interject with that frustration, and that just causes even more tension. We can approach it, and there is no other way, but you do need to politely interrupt if that's what's needed.
Yeah.
Or or you can let them go and say, we'll reschedule another meeting for the rest of it, which is not what you want. So you remain that calm person, and you also consider, I'm not going to say, John, up, which I'd love to, which I won't though. We can really direct our course of action to be a bit more considerate, and that's what I think is the biggest purpose of why I practice mindfulness, is to try to be more compassionate and considerate. And I'm not talking kumbaya stuff. I'm just talking about, we want stakeholder engagement. We want good relationships with our stakeholders. We want them to feel that they can trust us. And if we treat them without the right consideration or disrespect, then they're not going to do that. So these are key things that we need to come genuinely and openly to be with them, and on their terms. We can't really force them to change, but we can only change ourselves. So once again, coming to it from our calm position is really key.
And I suppose that leads to my next question, Kathy, which is about stakeholder engagement planning. Because, of course, all of this overlaps with the fact that, as BAs, there's a whole bunch of BA planning and monitoring activities, understanding stakeholders and continually figuring out how to engage with them, when to engage with them, how much they need to participate, those sorts of things. And, I've heard, I know you've written an article about a stakeholder engagement canvas, which I think is just a fantastic tool. I wonder whether you could briefly talk us through this without putting you on the spot too much.
Would you believe it? I wanted to share my screen, but I can't share it now.
Is it not? Sorry. There we go. Let me change it. You should be able to share now. That's a setting I forgot.
There we go. That's okay. I knew we had it up before, and I thought, hey, what's going on there? I'm just going to share that canvas that we've talked about, and you might have seen it on one of the blogs or on LinkedIn. So it's So stakeholder analysis has lots of traditional tools. We can do our RACI, perfect, important stuff, power interest, absolutely, understand attitudes, understand a whole heap of things about our stakeholder. But I always found there wasn't a way to really go, what's really happening with this? So it's similar to all other Canvas tools where it's got 9 sections where we can brainstorm each of these sections and fill it in, whether it's ourselves to ourselves. Whilst I've created this primarily as a tool for me to think about how I'm going to engage with one other stakeholder, you could easily adapt this to say, how am I going to engage with a group of stakeholders? Maybe I am engaging with the whole marketing team. So I could try to adapt it as how would I view the marketing team almost as a collective whole if I wanted to. And I've also considered recently, because I was talking to someone about it last week, that in an agile team, sometimes a whole team is asking for stakeholders to come in and workshop with them. So you might even, as a team, collectively brainstorm how we're going to engage as a team a particular stakeholder as well. So you could use it that way. I never thought of that until my agile coach friend said that to me. But anyhow, so we've got the 9 sections. So of course we put our stakeholders' name and role and that kind of good stuff up there in the first one. So the first one is them, the stakeholder themselves. Who are they? What's their world like? What's happening in their life? What do they see? What do they hear? What's going on? What do they feel? What do they think? What's happening in their world? So we sort of try to figure out what they're doing. And it could be things like, this is someone under pressure. This is someone who's a new mum returning after mat leave. You know, it could be all sorts of things. We're really trying to understand them as a person in the world, not just a person at this project for these requirements and this right this minute. We understand who they are as a person. Then we go forward and say, what are their needs? So their needs being requirements, not just of the project or our solution, whatever we're working on, but what are the issues and problems they're facing? What's really going on for them? And more importantly, what do they need from me as a BA? Coming to help them. After all, we are change makers, change enablers. Hopefully we're here to help people, not make their lives more miserable. Understanding their goals and objectives is a little bit traditional. You know, what do they want to achieve short and long term? What's valuable to them? What do they want from this project? And that's that with them, the what's in it for me from their point of view. What are they wanting? You know, as far as the project or the product that we're working on is concerned. Context is everything. We know that. So we need to understand the nature of the work that we're doing. So what's their level of expertise? Where are they coming from? What's their information? And we think of SME, so subject matter experts. What is that subject that they're an expert of? We might even talk about the project overview, their roles, what inputs and outputs, their background, the settings, the surroundings. So we sort of put ourselves as 2 people coming together in the context of the work that we're doing together. What is that work that we're going to be doing together? The activities are the simple things. What type of interactions am I expecting? They're going to come to workshops. We're going to do one-on-ones. Am I just emailing them? Am I just doing Zoom calls? What are those interactions? And the second one underneath that is the outcome. So what is the expected outcome from this engagement? So what are they expecting from us? Do they want emails? Do they want a specification? Do they want story maps? Do they want flowcharts? What do they want? What artifacts do they want from us? So what is the expected outcome of us working together? It may be heaps of things there. And again, it might be part of our typical stakeholder planning process when we think of that first task as far as the planning and monitoring goes. The far right there is talking about myself. So this is where mindfulness comes in. I go into my own thoughts and into my own beliefs. What perceptions have I got coming in? Maybe there's history. Maybe I've been told by somebody else something about this stakeholder. So what are my beliefs that I'm holding of this person right now? So what opinions might I have about this? So I start thinking about, all right, whether they're true or not, I want to examine them for myself, because quite often half of those will be true, but half of them are probably completely wrong. But we need to be able to put them out and be aware of what are those beliefs that we've got of this stakeholder, so we can challenge our own beliefs and hopefully even drop them, so we can come from that, again, open, curious kind of point of view and dropping those beliefs so we can go deeper when we're working with them. The two bottom parts of the canvas, I always think of the lean canvas when I thought of this part, is what are the risks? So what risks could happen? What potential problems or conflict, misunderstanding, miscommunication could happen between me and this stakeholder? We could be analysing their attitudes, their communication styles, their time. So we're looking at what sort of disagree and objections could arise if we don't plan this carefully. And then, of course, the other side is what practices are we going to employ and deploy to ensure that we get effective engagement. And that includes reminding ourselves of the types of mindfulness practices that we might need to do, especially if we've understood our own bias and our own projections. We can kind of maybe come up with a little internal, dare I say it, mantra to say, stop thinking that way, stop thinking that way, or he's not like that, it's just what you've heard, or whatever it is. So I can make sure that I've got my own kind of mindfulness strategy as well as engagement strategy to ensure that I can put the right practices in place. So when I am engaging with this person, no matter whether it's one-on-one or workshops or just on emails, I can be sure that I've planned my approach in that more deeper interpersonal way and really thinking about that connection.
That's really interesting, Kathy, and that planning, because often we think about, or I know a traditional way of thinking about stakeholder engagement is very much about sort of, how do we get them to engage with us? It's not always about how do we make ourselves engaging and how do we prepare ourselves as individuals for how that person might respond, which leads us to an observation that Miranu's made in the Q&A, which is just an observation. I think this is so powerful. We can choose. This means we're in control, and this comes with power that we need to be aware of, which of course is very true. There's that, we have, and I suppose this comes back to the sort of acting compassionately and ethically and all of those sorts of things. And Christy says, hi, Kathy and Adrian, great topic and love how soothing listening to Kathy is. Completely agree with that. Question, what do you see as the differences and similarities between mindfulness and emotional intelligence? So just briefly, Kathy, because I know we want to just finish on a little bit of a mindfulness session before we end, but how would you see the similarities and differences between EI and mindfulness? Tricky question.
It is. It's written about a lot. Daniel Goleman, obviously the professor who came up with the emotional intelligence in the first place, talks about this four parts to emotional intelligence. Mindfulness can't make you emotionally intelligent, but it underpins some of those competencies. So those emotional intelligence competencies, and there's 4 of them, I'm not going to go through them because I'm not Daniel Goleman, I'm not an EI kind of expert. I do know a little bit about the topic. But when you go and have a bit of a research, Daniel Goleman does recognise the importance of mindfulness, because when we're talking about self-regulation, you can't regulate yourself if you not have any self-awareness. So self-awareness comes before self-regulation. And if you're not self-regulated, it's going to impact your ability to monitor your emotional intelligence when connecting with others. So awareness and then the ability to regulate, there's definitely an awareness required before we can actually practice that emotional intelligence. There's heaps of great research out there. Definitely get in touch if I can help you with finding it. But there is Daniel Goleman himself has actually written a fair bit on the connection of how mindfulness is a key skill to improve emotional intelligence.
Fantastic. That keeps the foundation for it. So, I know here in the UK it's about 9:25. It's late where you are. If for those folks in Europe, it's all sorts of different times depending on which part of Europe. So, any chance you could lead us through a quick mindful session now to clear our minds before our next meeting?
Sure. Let's keep it really light and really brief. So I'm just going to take a moment. Let's see if we can become aware and come to the present. So let's just do that together and let's get that complete awareness. So I invite you to close your eyes if you're comfortable to. So if you can just close your eyes just for a moment, take a breath, and just consider what's around you right now. What can you hear? Maybe what can you smell? Is it hot? Is it cold? No judgment, no inner commentary, just experience. What can you feel around you right now? What can you hear? What's really happening around you? Try to drop those thoughts about, oh, that's loud or that's interrupting. Just hear them, just as they are, without that thought process with it. Just take a moment to really see what's around you or feel what's around you. Now let's bring some awareness into this beautiful body of ours. Contemplate, what does it feel like to be sitting? Can you feel the subtle hardness of the seat below you against your back? Can you feel your feet in your shoes and socks? What does that feel like? Can you feel the subtle movement of air around your face and head? See if you can be aware of the air moving. It's always moving, not necessarily a wind, but can you feel the air moving around your face and head? Drop into your body and feel it. Feel it, the subtle pull of gravity to the ground. Now see if you can bring all your focus to your breath. Noticing the subtle air movement in your mouth or nostrils as you breathe in and out. The expand and contract of your chest, or the rise and fall of your abdomen. You're breathing all day, every day, but how often have you stopped to notice it? Spend a few moments taking a few deep breaths. No need to alter your breaths, just natural. Just be aware of this act of breathing in and out all day long. Just hone in on that for a moment. So now hopefully you're feeling a little bit more aware. And those thoughts maybe are quieting down a little bit. And that's it. Nice and quick awareness practice.
Wow.
Nice and quick.
I'm sure, I don't know about anyone following along on live or on the recording, but that, well, I mean, I know we've had this conversation many times, Kathy, but I think it was fateful when I first met you because I really needed to get back into mindfulness, and it just makes such a difference. Even just it never ceases to amaze me what just a short exercise like that, how much better you can feel. Because I've got some stuff I've got to write up today, and I'm feeling like my mind. It's like, why are we so afraid of silence? We feel we have to fill that gap with stuff, but clarity comes with maybe allowing the silence, doesn't it? So excellent. Well, fantastic. Well, we're nearly at the end of our time. Apologies if we haven't been able to answer your question, but just one final question for you, Kathy. What would your biggest takeaway be, or your biggest piece of advice? And I will just bring in one final question from Arvind, which is around being in the middle of a political hustle at work. And it sounds like there's some sort of potential land grab going on and no regard for respect. How do you respond to like those jabs in meetings? So I guess two questions there. One is, how can we respond to those jabs? And also your biggest takeaway generally about mindfulness?
I think the answer is the same. Keep an eye on what's happening in your mind. You can't control the other people's minds or their thoughts, and perhaps not even their actions or their words, but you can certainly control yours.
Yeah.
So when those jabs are happening, don't let it affect you. Allow you to be that like a water off a duck's back and say, well, it's not going to affect me. So if I can remain calm and people can kind of see that in me, maybe that might rub off on them and they'll be curious to say, hey, I'm just going to say, look, be more focused on why am I thinking that? It's not appropriate. Let's maintain a more wiser position by not reacting and getting involved. They want to do it. I can't stop them, but maybe I can influence them from my own way. I find that VAs, we are leaders, and we can influence through leadership by our own actions, or lack of action.
Lead by that example. So, Kathy, well, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. I'm absolutely certain that everyone watching will have got lots from this and some real practical thoughts to take away. If people want to connect, if people want to stay in touch, how can they do that?
Fantastic. So I don't do social media apart from good old LinkedIn. You won't find me on any of the other stuff. It's just not worth my time. I'm too busy for that sort of stuff. While I know it's very useful, but not for me. So on LinkedIn, Kathy Berkidge, I'm the only one in the world. So you'll find me on LinkedIn. Feel free to drop in, connect with me, and you'll hear about my blogs. And of course, we have a successful stakeholder engagement half-day workshop coming up on April the 13th. It's from 9 to 1 on Tuesday, April 13th. That's UK time. For those in Australia, that's 6 p.m. till 10 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. It will be end of daylight savings by then. And of course, check your own time zones. If GMT 9 to 1, half day, 4 hours, lots and lots of exercises and practical tips, as well as some extended mindfulness practices, as well as a much deeper dive into the engagement canvas. So hopefully I'll see you all there.
Definitely. I've just put the link to that in the chat, and I'd encourage everyone to take a look at that, because Kathy and I recorded a video of us sort of talking about the content of that session, and it is still the early bird window, which is closing soon, but you can get 25% off if you're quick and you click through there and register. And we look forward to seeing you there. So thanks very much again, Kathy. All that's left for me to say is a massive thank you to you for being here. A massive thank you to everyone who's attended live, asked a question, or is watching the recording. One other event I just want to let everyone know about, which is in a couple of days' time, is the next episode of BA Fringe. Now, BA Fringe is, rather than being a webinar on one topic for an hour, it's sort of like a bit more like a TV show with different guests on different topics. It fills up. It generally sells out. So if you want to get a ticket to that, do click through, because there's limited space on the Zoom in the Zoom room on there, and we're discussing accessibility, empathy and digital experience design, product ownership analysis, and gamification is the third title there as well. So do check that one out and register. So thanks again, Kathy. Enjoy the rest of your day, which is not very much, I suppose, but enjoy your evening. Thanks to everyone.
Enough, I've got another conference. I'm at BA and Beyond. So
oh, of course.
That's at midnight my time.
Thanks for
a midnight session.
And stay safe, everyone, and see you again soon.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Adrian.
Take care. Bye. Bye.
Bye.